The silence in the conference room was deafening, broken only by the scratching of a cheap ballpoint pen against crisp legal paper. Mark didn't just want a divorce. He wanted a spectacle. He threw his head back, a cruel smirk playing on his lips as he looked at the woman he had vowed to love forever. "Face it, Elena," he sneered, checking his platinum Rolex Submariner for the third time in a minute. "You're 32, you have no career, and frankly, you're boring. Without me, you're invisible. I'm doing you a favor by cutting you loose before my promotion to regional VP goes public. You wouldn't fit in my new world anyway." He thought he was the main character of her life. He had no idea that the man waiting for her downstairs, a man whose name appeared on the skyscrapers visible through the window, was checking his watch too. Mark was about to learn that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the calm before a devastating storm. The air conditioning in the offices of Henderson, Miller and Associates was set to a frigid 68 degrees. But Eleanor felt a different kind of chill. It was the icy dismissal radiating from the man sitting across the mahogany table. Mark Sterling, her husband of 7 years, soon to be her ex-husband. He sat with his legs sprawled wide, taking up as much space as possible, a physical manifestation of his ego. His suit was a custom charcoal Armani, tailored to perfection to hide the slight paunch he'd developed over the last year of business dinners, which Elena knew were mostly dates with his 24-year-old assistant, Chloe. "Are we almost done here?" Mark asked, drumming his fingers on the leather armrest. "I have a lunch reservation at Le Bernardin at 1. Unlike some people, my time actually equates to money." Mr. Henderson, Mark's high-priced attorney, adjusted his glasses. He was a man who looked like a shark that had learned to walk upright. "Mrs. Sterling just needs to initial the clause regarding the waiver of spousal support, and we can finalize the asset division regarding the condo in Brooklyn." Elena looked down at the document. The black letters seemed to swim before her eyes. Waiver of spousal support. Mark had insisted on it. He claimed that since she had a degree in art history, she was fully employable, and he shouldn't have to subsidize her laziness. The fact that she had spent the last 5 years supporting his career, hosting his dinner parties, and managing his life so he could focus on climbing the corporate ladder at Apex Global Logistics was apparently irrelevant. "Just sign it, Elle," Mark sighed, rolling his eyes. "Don't look at me like a wounded puppy. It's pathetic. You're young. Go get a job at a museum gift shop or something. You always liked painting, right? Go paint. Leave the real work to the adults." Eleanor gripped the pen tighter. Her knuckles turned white. She wasn't angry about the money. She wasn't even angry about Chloe, the administrative assistant who had been texting Mark heart emojis at 11 p.m. for 6 months. She was angry at the sheer, unadulterated disrespect. "I'm reading the terms, Mark," Elena said, her voice steady. It was the first time she had spoken in 20 minutes. Her voice was low, devoid of the tears Mark was so clearly hoping for. "Reading," Mark scoffed. "You wouldn't understand half the legal jargon in there anyway. Look, I'm being generous. I'm letting you keep the 2018 Honda. That's more than you deserve, considering you haven't contributed a dime to this household since 2019. "I contributed," Elena said softly, finally looking up. Her eyes were a piercing green, usually warm, but now flat and hard like polished emeralds. "I built your network, Mark. The dinner with the Japanese investors. I cooked that meal. I learned the cultural etiquette. I prepped you on their interests. You got that promotion because of that night." Mark let out a barking laugh. "Oh, please. You cooked some fish. I closed the deal. Don't confuse domestic chores with business acumen, sweetheart. This is exactly why we're divorced. You have no concept of reality." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, sensing the tension, but clearly on the side of the man paying his $800 hourly rate. "Mrs. Sterling, regarding the Brooklyn property, my client is offering a buyout of $25,000 for your share of the equity, given the current market volatility and the mortgage debt." "$25,000?" Elena interrupted. "The apartment is worth $1.2 million. We have $400,000 in equity. My share should be $200,000. Mark leaned forward, his cologne, Santal 33, a scent she used to love but now made her nauseous, wafting across the table. "Technically, yes. But practically. Who paid the mortgage, Elena?" "Me." "Who paid the HOA fees?" "Me. If you want to fight this in court, I will drag it out until you're bankrupt. I will spend every dime I have on Henderson here just to make sure you get zero. Or you take the $25K, you sign the papers, and you walk away today. Your choice." It was a bluff. Or maybe it wasn't. Mark was petty enough to burn his own house down just to see her choke on the smoke. Elena looked at the papers again. She thought about the last 7 years, the lonely nights, the gaslighting, the way he made her feel small so he could feel big. She reached into her purse. Mark flinched slightly, as if expecting a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a simple, sleek black phone. She checked the screen. One unread message. "Are you free yet? The engine is running." A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her mouth. "Fine," Elena said. Mark blinked. "Fine what?" "Fine. I'll take the $25,000. I'll waive the spousal support. I'll sign everything." Mark looked at his lawyer, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "See? I told you she'd fold. She has no fight in her." "Never did." He turned back to Eleanor, his voice dripping with condescension. "Smart girl. Finally making a logical decision. Maybe there's hope for you yet." Eleanor didn't respond. She simply uncapped the pen and began to sign. Page after page. Eleanor Sterling. Eleanor Sterling. With every signature, she felt a weight lifting off her chest. Mark thought he was stripping her of her assets, but in reality, he was stripping himself of his safety net. He was so busy counting his victories that he didn't realize he was playing a game he had already lost. And here, Mr. Henderson pointed to the final line, the dissolution of marriage decree. Elena signed it with a flourish. She set the pen down. "It's done." Mark snatched the papers up, checking them as if he expected her to have used invisible ink. "Done. Finally. I'm a free man." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Well, Elena, it's been something. I'd say, let's stay friends, but we both know I run in circles you can't keep up with." He checked his reflection in the glass window of the conference room, adjusting his tie. "I've got a car waiting downstairs. Chloe organized a little celebration lunch. I assume you're taking the subway. Or did your mum send you bus fare?" Elena stood up slowly. She was wearing a simple beige trench coat over a white dress. It was understated, elegant, and completely lost on Mark, who only valued brands that screamed their price tags. "I have a ride, Mark," she said calmly. "Oh? Uber pool?" He laughed again, clapping Mr. Henderson on the shoulder. "Good luck, Elena. Try not to spend that $25,000 all in one place. It has to last you, well, probably the rest of your life." He grabbed his leather briefcase and strutted toward the door, not even holding it open for her. He walked out like a king leaving his court. Elena waited a beat. She looked at Mr. Henderson, who was stuffing files into his bag. The lawyer looked up, meeting her gaze. For a second, he looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Sterling," the lawyer said awkwardly. "Good luck." "It's Miss Vance now," she corrected him. "And thank you, Mr. Henderson." You've been very enlightening." She walked to the door, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. She wasn't walking like a defeated woman. She was walking like someone who knew a secret that was about to change everything. As she stepped into the hallway, she pulled out her phone and typed a quick reply to the message. "Coming down now. He's ahead of me. Let the show begin." The elevator ride down from the 42nd floor was excruciatingly silent, mostly because Mark wouldn't stop humming. He was humming, "We Are the Champions." It was so on the nose that it felt like a bad movie, but Mark Sterling lacked any sense of irony. Elena stood in the back corner of the elevator car. Mark stood front and center, watching the numbers tick down. "So," Mark said, not turning around, addressing her reflection in the steel doors. "What's the plan? Moving back to Ohio? I heard the rent is cheap there. Fits your budget." "I'm staying in the city, Mark," Elena replied, checking her appearance in the mirrored wall. She smoothed her hair. "New York is expensive, Elena," he lectured, adopting his wise mentor tone. "You can't survive here on hopes and dreams. You need capital. You need connections. You have neither." Ding. The doors opened to the lobby of the Sterling and Cooper building. No relation to Mark, though he often joked that it was destined. The lobby was a cavernous expanse of marble and glass, bustling with lunch-hour traffic. Mark strode out, expecting Eleanor to trail behind him like a lost puppy. He walked with a bounce in his step, high-fiving the security guard who clearly didn't know who he was, but felt obligated to respond to the suit. "Watch this," Mark whispered to himself, spotting the revolving doors. "Freedom." He pushed through the doors and stepped out onto the bustling sidewalk of Fifth Avenue. The midday sun was blinding. The noise of the city, honking taxis, chatter, construction, hit them instantly. "Ah, smell that?" Mark asked, taking a deep breath of exhaust fumes. "That's the smell of a fresh start." He scanned the curb. "Where is it?" Chloe said she booked the black car. He spotted a sleek, black Mercedes S-Class pulling up to the curb. He grinned. "Right on time. That's the difference between us, Elena. I execute. I plan. The world bends to people like me." He turned to look at her one last time. She had stepped out of the building and was standing a few feet away, putting on a pair of oversized sunglasses. "Well," Mark said, checking his watch again. "This is it. Have a nice life. If you ever need a reference for a receptionist job, you can email my assistant. I'll see if she can fit you in." He reached for the door handle of the Mercedes, but before his hand could touch the chrome, a large hand intercepted him. "Excuse me, sir. Step away from the vehicle." Mark looked up, startled. A man in a black suit, wearing an earpiece and sunglasses, was blocking his path. He was 6'4", and looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. "Excuse me?" Mark bristled. "This is my car. I ordered it." "This vehicle is part of a private convoy, sir," the security guard said, his voice flat. "Please step back to the sidewalk." "Convoy?" Mark scoffed. "Buddy, I'm a VP at Apex Global. I don't know who you think you are, but—" Suddenly, the air seemed to change. The noise of the street didn't stop, but the attention of the crowd shifted. It wasn't just one Mercedes. A second black SUV pulled up behind the first, then a third, and finally, sandwiched in the middle, a car that made the Mercedes look like a toy. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom 8, extended wheelbase. Midnight blue, so dark it looked black, with the Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament gleaming in gold. The sheer presence of the car demanded attention. People on the sidewalk stopped walking. Tourists pulled out phones. Mark froze. He knew cars. He knew that a Rolls-Royce Phantom cost $500,000 minimum. He knew this wasn't an Uber. "Who the hell is this?" Mark muttered, his annoyance turning to curiosity. Some diplomat? A rapper? The security guard who had stopped Mark stepped forward and opened the back door of the Rolls-Royce. Mark watched, transfixed. He expected a movie star. Maybe the mayor. A man stepped out. He was tall, older than Mark, maybe late 40s, with silver-streaked hair and a jawline that could cut glass. He wore a navy blue suit that didn't just fit, it flowed. No tie. The top button of his crisp white shirt was undone. He exuded a kind of power that Mark had only read about in Forbes magazines. It wasn't the loud, arrogant power Mark tried to project. It was quiet. Absolute. Mark's jaw dropped. He recognized him. Everyone in the business world recognized him. It was Julian Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Enterprises, the man who had just acquired a majority stake in half the tech sector. A billionaire with a capital B. He was known as the Architect because he didn't just build companies, he built empires. Holy, Mark whispered, it's Julian Thorne. Mark's mind raced. Why is Julian Thorne here? Is he visiting the law firm? Maybe he needs a new VP of logistics. This is it. This is my chance. Mark straightened his tie, pushed past his shock, and prepared to introduce himself. If he could just get a handshake, a word. Julian Thorne ignored the crowd. He ignored the security detail. He ignored Mark entirely. He walked straight toward Elena. Mark blinked. Is he walking past her? Elena didn't move. She stood there on the sidewalk, her hands in the pockets of her beige trench coat, watching the billionaire approach. Mark wanted to yell at her to move out of the way. She's blocking his path. She's going to embarrass herself. But then, Julian Thorne stopped directly in front of Eleanor. The cold, calculated look on his face vanished, replaced by a warmth that stunned the onlookers. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of immense respect. "Miss Vance," Julian said, his voice deep and smooth, carrying over the street noise. "My apologies for the delay. Traffic on the bridge was unavoidable." Elena smiled. It was a real smile, one Mark hadn't seen in years. "You're right on time, Julian, as always." Julian extended his hand, not to shake hers, but to take her hand in his. He brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles briefly, then tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "The jet is fueled and waiting at Teterboro," Julian said, "and I took the liberty of ordering that vintage Pinot you like for the flight to Paris." "Paris?" Mark blurted out. The word escaped his mouth before he could stop it. The sheer absurdity of the situation short-circuited his brain. His soon-to-be destitute ex-wife was being escorted by a billionaire to a private jet to go to Paris. Julian Thorne turned slowly. His eyes landed on Mark. The warmth was gone instantly. Julian looked at Mark the way a lion looks at a particularly annoying fly. "And you are?" Julian asked. Mark stammered. I'm Mark Sterling. We were just signing the divorce papers. I'm a VP at Apex Global." Julian stared at him for a long, uncomfortable second. "Apex Global?" He glanced at his head of security. "Don't we own the parent company that supplies their shipping containers?" The security guard nodded. "We acquired them last Tuesday, sir." Julian turned back to Mark, a look of mild amusement on his face. "Ah, an employee. Well, Mark Sterling, I suppose I should thank you." "Thank me," Mark squeaked. "Yes," Julian said, tightening his grip on Eleanor's arm gently, "for signing the papers. You have just released the single most valuable asset your life will ever contain." "And you did it for—" Julian glanced at Elena. $25,000, Elena supplied, her voice dry. Julian chuckled. It was a dark, rich sound. 25,000, a bargain of the century. Mark looked from Julian to Elena, his brain struggling to process the connection. Elena, you know him? Elena looked at Mark. The fear, the hesitation, the submissiveness he was used to. It was all gone. Mark, she said, you spent 7 years telling me I was nobody. You were so busy looking in the mirror, you never bothered to ask who I was before I met you, or who my friends were. But you're a housewife, Mark whispered. I'm an art restorer, Mark, she said. A specialist. I consult for the Louvre, the Met, and... She gestured to Julian, private collectors with extensive portfolios. She's not just a consultant, Julian corrected, looking at Elena with obvious adoration. She is the only person in the world I trust to manage my collection, and for the last 3 years, while you were ignoring her to chase, what was it? A regional promotion? She has been secretly advising me on acquisitions worth more than your entire company. Mark felt the blood drain from his face. Shall we? Julian asked Elena, turning his back on Mark as if he had ceased to exist. Let's go, Elena said. The security guard opened the rear door of the Rolls-Royce. Elena slid into the plush leather interior. Julian followed her. Just before the door closed, Elena leaned forward. She lowered her sunglasses and looked at Mark, who was standing frozen on the sidewalk, his mouth agape, his freedom suddenly tasting like ash. "Oh, and Mark!" she called out. Mark looked up, desperate for a lifeline, a joke, anything. "That business dinner you have with the Japanese investors next week?" Elena said. "The one you're banking on for your quarterly bonus?" Yes? Julian just bought that company this morning. She smiled. "I'd check your email. I think they're cancelling the contract." The door slammed shut with a heavy, expensive thud. The Rolls-Royce pulled away, gliding into traffic like a shark swimming through minnows. Mark stood alone on the curb. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with trembling hands. It was an email from his boss. Subject: urgent. Major contract cancellation, restructuring. Mark looked at the email. Then he looked at the retreating taillights of the Rolls-Royce. "What just happened?" he whispered to the empty air. But the drama was far from over, because Mark Sterling wasn't the type to let go easily, and he had no idea that the other woman, Chloe, was about to make his bad day significantly worse. The interior of the Gulfstream GS650ER was quieter than a library, a sanctuary suspended in the sky. The beige leather seats were softer than any furniture Elena had owned in the last decade, hugging her tired frame. As the jet climbed steeply out of Teterboro, leaving the grey, suffocating skyline of New Jersey behind, Elena finally let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 7 years. Julian sat across from her, a crystal tumbler of sparkling water in his hand. He wasn't furiously typing on a laptop or barking orders into a phone. He was just looking at her, with a patience that was unnerving but strangely comforting. "You held up well," Julian said softly, breaking the silence. "Better than I would have. I probably would have bought the building just to evict him." Elena laughed, a genuine bubbling sound that surprised even her. It felt rusty, unused. "That would have been excessive, Julian." "Is it?" He swirled his water, watching the bubbles rise. "The man is a fool. He held a diamond in his hand and treated it like a paperweight." Elena looked out the porthole window. The clouds were fluffy white blankets below them, shielding her from the world she had just left. "He wasn't always like that. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't want to see it. When we met, I was struggling. My dad had just passed. The gallery I worked at closed down. Mark seemed so stable. so sure of himself. I mistook arrogance for confidence. And now? Now I feel... She paused, searching for the word, watching the sunlight glint off the wing. Lighter. But also terrified. Mark is petty, Julian. He's not going to just let this go. He's going to think I cheated on him. He's going to spin a narrative to anyone who will listen. Julian's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. Let him spin. He's a hamster in a wheel. He can run as fast as he wants. He's not going anywhere. Besides, you're under my protection now. Professional and personal. Eleanor took a sip of the Pinot Noir the flight attendant had poured, a 2010 Domaine de la Romane Conti. About that, the personal part. What exactly did you tell your security team? They looked at me like I was the Queen of England back there. I told them you are the most important acquisition of my career, Julian said, his eyes twinkling mischievously over the rim of his glass. Elena blushed, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. Julian, stop. I'm your art curator. I handle the Thorn collection. Elena. Julian leaned forward, his voice dropping an octave, intimate and serious. You know it's been more than that for a long time. When we met at that auction in Vienna 3 years ago, I didn't hire you because you knew the provenance of that Klimt painting. I hired you because you were the only person in the room who wasn't afraid to tell me I was overbidding. Elena smiled at the memory. You were overbidding. By 3 million euros. It was a forgery. And you saved me a fortune. You've been saving me ever since. He reached across the small, burled wood table and covered her hand with his. It was warm, strong, and devoid of the clamminess she associated with Mark. I respected your marriage, Elena, even when I saw how he treated you at those gala events, ignoring you, talking over you, treating you like a prop. I stayed back. I waited. But the moment you told me you were filing, the gloves came off. Elena looked at his hand, covering hers. I need time, Julian. I just signed the papers an hour ago. I don't know who I am outside of Mark's wife. Take all the time you need, Julian said, squeezing her hand gently before pulling back. We're going to Paris to appraise the Delancey estate. Strictly business. You'll have your own suite at the Ritz, but I'm warning you, I'm going to court you, Elena, and unlike Mr. Sterling, I don't give up. Just then, Elena's phone buzzed on the table, vibrating angrily against the wood. She glanced at it. New message from Mark. Who is he? You lied to me. You were seeing him the whole time. I'm calling Henderson. This is fraud. I'm going to ruin you. Elena sighed, a heavy weight returning to her chest. She reached for the phone to turn it off. Problem? Julian asked, his tone shifting from warm to steel. Mark, she said. He's figuring it out. Julian picked up his own phone. He didn't look worried. He looked bored. He typed a quick message. Don't worry about Henderson. My legal team is already handling the fallout. By the time we land in Paris, Mark will be too busy trying to keep his job to worry about harassing you. What did you do? Elena asked, a mix of fear and excitement fluttering in her stomach. I made a phone call, Julian said simply. Remember that restructuring email you mentioned to him? It's just the beginning. While Elena was sipping vintage wine at 40,000 feet, Mark Sterling was currently experiencing a rapid, ungraceful descent into hell. He sat in his corner office at Apex Global, staring at his computer screen. The email from the CEO wasn't just a cancellation of the Japanese contract. It was a summons. Mark, come to my office immediately. HR is present. This can't be happening, Mark muttered, running a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect gel job he had spent 20 minutes on that morning. It's a coincidence. It has to be. He grabbed his suit jacket and marched toward the elevator, his heart hammering against his ribs. As he passed Chloe's desk, he stopped. She was filing her nails, looking bored, her headset resting on her neck. "Chloe, cancel my lunch at Le Bernardin," Mark barked, trying to regain some sense of control. "And get Henderson on the phone. Tell him I need to sue my ex-wife for fraud." Chloe didn't look up. "I can't do that, Mark." "Excuse me." Mark stopped dead. "What did you say?" Chloe finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the flirtatious spark they usually held. "I said I can't. I don't work for you anymore." Mark blinked, his brain misfiring. "What are you talking about?" "I just got transferred," Chloe said, popping a piece of gum with an obnoxious snap. "To the 45th floor, executive assistance team. Apparently your department is being downsized." "Downsized?" Mark's voice rose to a screech. "I am the department." "Not anymore," Chloe smirked. "Oh, and Mark? About us? I think we should cool it. I don't date guys with unstable futures. It's bad for my brand." Mark felt like he'd been slapped with a wet fish. You little—" "Careful," Chloe warned, pointing a manicured finger to the security camera in the corner. "Harassment lawsuit. Remember? You wrote the policy." Mark turned and stormed into the elevator, jamming the button. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. "She's leaving me? Now? After I got divorced for her?" He arrived at the CEO's floor. The atmosphere was grim. People were whispering in huddles, but when they saw Mark, they scattered like roaches. He walked into the CEO's office. David, the CEO of Apex, was sitting behind his massive glass desk. Next to him was the director of HR, a woman named Linda, who Mark had always considered a pushover. "David," Mark said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "Look, I saw the email about the Japanese deal. It's a misunderstanding. I can fix it. I just need to get them on the phone." "Sit down, Mark," David said. His voice wasn't angry, it was tired. Mark sat. The chair felt lower than usual. "The Japanese deal is dead," David said bluntly. "The company that bought them, Thorn Enterprises, flagged our logistics division as a high-risk liability." Mark froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. "High risk? Why?" David slid a manila folder across the desk. They cited unethical leadership practices and potential reputational damage due to executive misconduct. "Misconduct?" Mark sputtered. "I haven't done anything. My numbers are up 10%. "They sent us photos, Mark," Linda from HR said quietly. She opened the folder. Mark looked down, and his stomach dropped to his shoes. There were photos of him and Chloe at a candlelit dinner in Cabo, a trip he had expensed as a client meeting. Photos of him charging jewelry to the company card. And most damning of all, a transcript of a conversation he'd had on his work phone with a competitor, joking about Apex's trade secrets. Where did they get these?" Mark whispered, his face draining of color. "Apparently they conducted a due diligence audit before the acquisition," David said. "They dug deep. Mark, you've been sloppy. You've been arrogant. I can explain." "You're fired," David said. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. "Fired?" Mark stood up, his legs wobbling. "You can't fire me. I'm the best earner you have." "You're a liability," David snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "Thorn Enterprises made it clear. If you remain employed here, they pull all their contracts. That's 60% of our revenue. I'm not sinking this company for you." "Pack your things," Linda said, standing up. "Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. Mark stumbled out of the office. He felt dizzy. The hallway seemed to tilt. Thorn Enterprises, Julian Thorn. Elena. It was a hit, a targeted precision strike. Elena hadn't just left him, she had handed the executioner the axe. He walked back to his office, his vision blurry. He started throwing things into a box. His regional VP nameplate, his stress ball, a picture of him shaking hands with the mayor, which he now realized was probably just a photo op the mayor didn't remember. He grabbed his phone. He needed to call Henderson. He needed to sue Elena. He needed to destroy her. He dialed the lawyer's number with trembling fingers. "Henderson, you won't believe what happened. That witch set me up. She's sleeping with Julian Thorne. He just got me fired. I want to sue for everything. Defamation, fraud, emotional distress." There was a long, pregnant pause on the other end. "Mark," Henderson's voice was icy, "I can't represent you anymore." "What? Why?" "Conflict of interest," Henderson said smoothly. "My firm. We just got retained by a new client, a very large client. They've put us on a retainer that covers our entire operating budget for the next 5 years. "Who?" Mark demanded, though the sickness in his gut told him the answer. "Thorne Enterprises," Henderson said. "Mr. Thorne has retained us for all his New York real estate dealings, and part of the agreement is that we cannot represent anyone in litigation against him or his associates." "You sell out!" Mark screamed. "I paid you thousands." "And they are paying us millions," Henderson said. "Strictly business, Mark. Good luck." The line went dead. Mark lowered the phone. He was standing in his empty office, holding a cardboard box. No job, no girlfriend, no lawyer. And thanks to the divorce settlement he had pushed for, no claim on the house or spousal support. He had $25,000 in the bank and a leased Mercedes he could no longer afford. He looked out the window. High above the city, a white trail of a jet cut across the blue sky, heading east, toward Paris. "This isn't over," Mark hissed, his eyes filling with tears of rage and humiliation. "You think you've won, Elena? You think you can just fly away? I'll find something. Everyone has a secret. And I'm going to find yours." Mark walked out of the building, not with a strut, but with a limp. But as he hit the sidewalk, a dark idea began to form in his mind. He knew someone, a private investigator he had used to check on his competitors years ago, a guy who played dirty. If he couldn't beat Julian Thorne in the boardroom, he would destroy Elena in the court of public opinion. He would ruin her reputation so badly that even a billionaire wouldn't want to be seen with her. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number saved as Ratchet. "Hey," Mark said, his voice trembling with malice. "I have a job for you. I need dirt on Elena Vance, and I need it fast." Paris in the rain was a cliché, but to Elena, standing on the balcony of the Ritz-Carlton, overlooking the Place Vendôme, it felt like a rebirth. For the first time in years, she wasn't worrying about whether the roast chicken was too dry or if she had ironed Mark's shirts correctly. She was worrying about something real, the authenticity of a 17th century Vermeer. She had spent the last 3 days in the dusty, climate-controlled vaults of the Delancey estate, proving her worth. She had identified 2 forgeries in a collection valued at over $200 million. Julian hadn't hovered. He hadn't micromanaged. He had simply trusted her. "You look like you're overthinking the brush strokes," a voice came from the doorway behind her. Elena turned. Julian was leaning against the doorframe, holding 2 espressos. He looked tired but content, the stress of his empire seeming to melt away in this city. "The blue pigment in the woman with a lute," Elena murmured, taking the cup he offered. "It's too bright for the era. I think it's a high-quality 19th century copy. If you buy the collection as is, you'll lose 20 million on that piece alone." Julian took a sip of his coffee, his eyes locked on hers. Then we don't buy it. I'll tell the estate lawyers we're pulling the offer on that piece based on your assessment." "Just like that?" Elena asked, stunned. "Mark used to argue with me over a $5 difference in cable bills. You're trusting me with $20 million? "I trust you with more than that, Elena," Julian said. He stepped closer, the Paris rain creating a soft rhythm against the balcony doors. "I think you're realizing that your value isn't what Mark said it was. He was trying to bankrupt your spirit because he knew he couldn't afford your soul." Elena looked down, her heart racing. "Julian, I'm not ready for—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking for anything. Just dinner. Tonight. No art talk, no business. Just two people in Paris." Elena looked at him, at the kindness in his eyes that she had been starved of for so long. "Okay. Dinner." While Elena was preparing for a night at L'Ambroise, Mark Sterling was sitting in a booth at a dive bar in Queens called The Rusty Nail. The floor was sticky, the air smelled of stale beer, and it was a far cry from the exclusive clubs he used to frequent. Across from him sat a man who looked like he was made of spare parts. Ratchet was a private investigator who had lost his license in the 90s for wiretapping a senator, but he was cheap and effective. "So?" Mark asked, nervously tapping his fingers on the chipped table. "What do you have? Is she sleeping with him? Is she a gold digger?" Ratchet took a slow drag of a cigarette, ignoring the "no smoking" sign. He tossed a manila envelope onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "She's clean on the cheating front, boss," Ratchet grumbled, his voice like gravel in a blender. "Boringly clean. She goes to museums. She goes to the grocery store. She goes home. But what?" Mark leaned in, his eyes hungry. "I dug into her past. Before she met you. Her time in Vienna," Ratchet said, a cruel grin revealing yellowed teeth. "You said she was an art restorer? Well, 10 years ago, she was working at the Vogel Gallery in Austria. There was an incident." Mark tore open the envelope. Inside were photocopies of old police reports in German and a translated summary. "She was detained," Ratchet explained, pointing a dirty fingernail at a grainy photo of a younger Elena looking terrified in a police station. "Suspicion of art fraud. A Rembrandt sketch went missing, and a fake was put in its place. She was the one who had access to the vault." "She's a thief?" Mark breathed, a smile spreading across his face that was purely reptilian. "My perfect, moral little wife is an art thief." "Charges were dropped," Ratchet shrugged. "Insufficient evidence. The gallery owner refused to press charges, but she was fired and blacklisted from the European circuit. That's why she came back to the States and met you. She was running away." Mark laughed. It was a loud, manic sound that made the bartender look over nervously. "This is it," Mark whispered. "Julian Thorne, the man of integrity, is dating a suspected art forger, a thief. If this gets out, his reputation takes a hit, and her career. It's over. She'll never work in a museum again." "You want me to leak it?" Ratchet asked. "No," Mark said, pocketing the photos. "I'm going to do it myself. They're coming back to New York on Friday for the Thorne Foundation Gala. It's the social event of the season. All the press will be there." Mark stood up, throwing a wad of cash onto the table. He felt taller, stronger. "I'm not just going to leak it," Mark sneered. "I'm going to hand-deliver it." The Thorne Foundation Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Dendor was illuminated by soft, golden light, and the room was filled with the 1% of the 1%. Senators, tech moguls, and Hollywood royalty mingled, sipping champagne that cost more than Mark's severance package. Elena stood by Julian's side, wearing a dress that Julian had commissioned for her, emerald green silk that matched her eyes, with a back that draped low, elegant and daring. She felt beautiful, but she also felt exposed. "You're shaking," Julian whispered, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "I'm not used to the cameras," she admitted. The paparazzi outside had been blinding. "They're all shouting your name and asking who I am." "Let them ask," Julian smiled. "Tonight I introduce you not just as my partner in the collection, but as the new director of the Thorn Arts Initiative." Elena gasped. "Julian, you can't just—" "I can," he said firmly. "You're the best there is. It's time the world knew." Suddenly, a ripple went through the crowd. It wasn't the polite murmur of high society. It was the sharp, jagged noise of scandal. Phones were lighting up. People were whispering behind their hands, looking toward the entrance. Then they looked at Eleanor. A man in a tuxedo that was slightly too tight was pushing his way through the crowd. He wasn't on the guest list, but he had shouted loud enough about having vital information for the press that the reporters outside had caused a distraction, allowing him to slip in. It was Mark. He looked manic. His face was flushed, his hair slightly disheveled. He marched right up to where Julian and Eleanor stood near the podium. "Mark?" Eleanor stepped back, her hand flying to her chest. "What are you doing here?" Mark stopped 10 feet away. He turned to the crowd, raising his hands like a prophet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark shouted. The room went dead silent. The string quartet stopped playing. "Security," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't touch me," Mark yelled, pulling the sheaf of papers from his jacket pocket. "I'm here to save you all from a fraud. You think this woman is a sophisticated art expert? You think she's the future of the art world?" He threw the papers into the air. They fluttered down like confetti, copies of the police report, the mugshot of Eleanor. "She's a thief!" Mark screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Eleanor. "She was arrested in Vienna 10 years ago for swapping a Rembrandt for a forgery. She was fired, blacklisted. She's a criminal who tricked me into marriage to hide her past, and now she's tricked Mr. Thorn." The crowd gasped. Flashbulbs erupted like a thunderstorm. Elena stood frozen. The color drained from her face. She felt like she was back in that cold interrogation room in Vienna, young and alone. Mark turned to Julian, a triumphant smirk on his face. "There's your director, Julian, a common criminal. How does it feel to be played?" Mark waited for the anger. He waited for Julian to recoil, for the security to drag Eleanor away, for the validation that he was the good guy and she was the villain. But Julian didn't recoil. He didn't even look at the papers on the floor. Julian slowly, deliberately, reached out and took Elena's hand. He squeezed it hard. Then he stepped up to the microphone. "Are you quite finished, Mr. Sterling?" Julian asked. His voice was calm, amplified through the massive hall. It sounded like the voice of God. I, Mark faltered. "It's all there. The police report. She stole the Rembrandt." Julian looked at the crowd. "It's interesting you bring up the Vogel Gallery incident of 2015. Julian turned to a man standing in the front row, an elderly, dignified man with a white beard. "Monsieur Dubois, would you care to clarify?" The elderly man stepped forward. It was Henri Dubois, the current head of Interpol's Art Crime Division. Mark's eyes widened. "Miss Vance was indeed detained in 2015, Monsieur Dubois said, his French accent thick but clear. But she was not the thief. She was the whistleblower." A hush fell over the room, heavier than before. The gallery owner, Mr. Vogel, was the one forging his own inventory to pay off gambling debts, Dubois continued. Miss Vance discovered the swap. When she tried to report it, Vogel used his connections to frame her and have her arrested to silence her. She refused to sign a false confession, even after 3 days of interrogation. Because of her evidence, we were eventually able to indict Vogel 2 years later. Ms. Vance is not a criminal, Mr. Sterling. She is a hero who lost her career because she refused to lie. Elena looked at Julian, tears welling in her eyes. You knew? I check my sources, Elena, Julian whispered to her. I knew before I ever hired you. Julian turned back to Mark. Mark was shrinking. He looked physically smaller. The smirk was gone, replaced by a look of absolute horror. The crowd was turning on him. The whispers were now directed at his cruelty, his stupidity. You came here to destroy a woman who has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire life, Julian said, his voice turning to ice, and you trespassed to do it. Julian nodded to the head of security. Get him out of here. 2 massive guards grabbed Mark by the arms. Wait! No, I didn't know! Mark shrieked, struggling as his feet dragged across the marble floor. Elena! Tell them! We were married! Elena! Elena stepped forward. She took the microphone from Julian. Mark! She said. The guard stopped for a second. Mark looked at her with desperate hope. You were right about one thing, Elena said, her voice steady and strong. I am the future, and you're just history. Get him out, she commanded. As Mark was dragged out of the Temple of Dendor, kicking and screaming, the room erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Thunderous, cheering applause. Elena looked at Julian. He was beaming at her with pride. But as the gala continued and the adrenaline faded, Elena felt a strange unease. Mark was gone, humiliated. But a man like Mark, with nothing left to lose, was dangerous in a way they hadn't anticipated. Outside the museum, thrown onto the sidewalk in the rain, Mark lay in a puddle. His tuxedo was ruined. His reputation was incinerated. He had $0, 0 friends, and 0 dignity. He sat up, wiping mud from his face. A car slowed down in front of him. A window rolled down. It wasn't a police car. It was a grey sedan. Rough night, buddy? A voice asked. Mark looked up. It was Ratchet. I need to kill them, Mark mumbled, shivering. I need to make them pay. We can't do that, Ratchet said, unlocking the door. But I know some guys who don't care about art or galas. They only care about ransom. Mark looked at the open door. He had crossed the line from petty ex-husband to criminal conspirator. But looking back at the warm, golden glow of the museum where his ex-wife was being toasted as a queen, something inside him snapped permanently. He crawled into the car. Tell me more, Mark said. The rain at Teterboro Airport was relentless, turning the tarmac into a slick, black mirror. Mark Sterling crouched behind a fuel truck, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wasn't wearing his Italian suits tonight. He was in stolen mechanics coveralls, gripping a heavy pistol that felt foreign and terrifying in his hand. They're here, Ratchet hissed, checking his phone. Remember, shock and awe. Don't let them speak. Mark nodded, wiping sweat and rain from his eyes. He didn't want the money anymore. Not really. He wanted to see fear in Eleanor's eyes. He wanted to break the composure of Julian Thorne. The black Range Rover pulled up to the private jet. As the door opened, Mark sprinted from the shadows. Don't move! Mark screamed, leveling the gun at the couple emerging from the car. Hands where I can see them! Elena gasped, freezing on the bottom step of the jet. Julian looked up, his face unreadable in the dim runway lights. He slowly raised his hands, shielding Elena with his body. Mark, Elena whispered. She didn't look scared. She looked pitying. Go home. Don't do this. I don't have a home. Mark spat, his voice cracking. You took everything. My job, my reputation, my life. Now, I want 50 million wired to an offshore account, or I swear I'll end this right here." He turned to the private investigator. "Ratchet, get the zip ties. Bind them." Ratchet didn't move. He calmly pulled a pack of cigarettes from his jacket, shielding the flame from the wind as he lit one. "Ratchet!" Mark shrieked, panic rising in his throat. "Do it!" Ratchet took a long drag and exhaled a cloud of grey smoke. He looked past Mark and gave a lazy salute to the billionaire. "Evening, Mr. Thorne. Payment received." Mark froze. The cold rain seemed to seep into his marrow. "What?" "You hired a private investigator to stalk a billionaire, Mark," Julian said, his voice calm and dangerous. "Did you really think there is anyone in this city I don't know? Ratchet has been on my security payroll for a decade." Mark stumbled back, the gun shaking violently. "No, it's a lie." "It's a containment," Julian corrected. Before Mark could react, bright floodlights blinded him. The thugs Ratchet had brought tackled Mark to the wet pavement, twisting the gun from his hand. Sirens erupted from all sides as FBI agents swarmed the tarmac. Mark was hauled to his feet, mud streaking his face. He looked at Elena, desperate for a lifeline. "Elena, please! I just wanted you to see me!" Elena walked closer, safe under Julian's umbrella. She looked at the man she had wasted 7 wars on. "I see you, Mark," she said softly. "I see a small man who thought he was a giant. You wanted to be the main character so badly, you wrote yourself into a tragedy." As the agents shoved Mark into the back of a cruiser, the jet engines roared to life. He watched through the wire mesh of the police car window as the plane taxied down the runway, lifting off into the night, carrying Eleanor toward a future he could never touch. The cage door slammed shut, leaving Mark Sterling alone in the dark. We often think that revenge is about making someone else suffer. But real power, real victory, is simply outgrowing the people who tried to keep you small. Mark Sterling thought he was the main character of a drama, but he learned too late that his arrogance was actually the villain of a tragedy. He lost his wife, his career, and his freedom, not because of bad luck, but because he couldn't value what he held in his hands until it was gone. In life, you have to be careful who you mock on your way up, and even more careful who you kick on their way out. You never know who is waiting in the car downstairs. If you enjoyed this story of justice, karma, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the best revenge is living well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.